Dr. Lisa Carter stared at her computer screen in the Nevada desert facility and could not believe what she was seeing. 12 massive ships had appeared at the edge of their solar system, and they were moving toward Earth at impossible speeds. She had spent her whole life studying space and looking for signs of alien life, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Her hands shook as she reached for the emergency phone that connected directly to NORAD. General Ben Murphy was drinking his morning coffee when the call came through. Lisa's voice was tight with fear as she told him about the ships. Ben had been a soldier for 30 years and had seen combat in 3 different wars, but hearing about alien ships heading toward Earth made his blood run cold. He immediately called President Kate Williams, and within minutes the highest levels of government knew that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. The alien ships were beautiful in a terrifying way. They looked like massive crystals that caught and reflected starlight as they moved through space. Admiral Kekstar stood on the bridge of his flagship and felt confident about the mission ahead. The Zalarian Empire had conquered over 200 worlds, and Earth would be no different. His scouts had told him that the humans were primitive creatures who still used chemical rockets and had barely explored their own solar system. This would be an easy victory. President Williams sat in the Situation Room surrounded by her top advisors and military leaders. The alien message had come through all communication channels at once in perfect English. The voice was cold and mechanical as it delivered the ultimatum. Earth had 72 hours to surrender completely or face total destruction. There would be no negotiation and no mercy for those who resisted. Williams looked around the table at the faces of her cabinet members and saw the same determination in their eyes that she felt in her heart. Captain Jake Rodriguez was aboard the Liberty when the alert came through. The ship was humanity's newest and most advanced space vessel, but compared to what was coming toward them, it might as well have been made of paper. Jake had trained his whole life for space combat, but had never imagined he would face alien invaders. He called his crew to battle stations and began coordinating with other space forces around the world. If Earth was going to fight, then every ship and every weapon would be needed. The Zalarians expected fear and panic from the humans, but instead, they received something they had never encountered before. Every nation on Earth began preparing for war. Factories that made cars started making weapons. Scientists who studied plants began working on military technology. Children who were too young to fight started learning how to hide and survive. The entire planet was transforming itself into a fortress. Colonel Amy Foster commanded the small military base on Luna Station. When the alien ultimatum expired, she knew her base would be one of the first targets. The moon base had only 50 soldiers and limited weapons, but Amy had no intention of surrendering. She ordered her people to prepare defensive positions and sent a message back to Earth that Luna Station would fight to the last person. Her soldiers were scared, but they trusted their commander and they would not abandon their posts. Dr. Nathan Price worked frantically in his laboratory trying to understand alien technology from the few signals they had intercepted. The aliens used energy weapons and force fields that were far beyond human science, but Nathan believed that every technology had weaknesses. He had been studying physics for 20 years, and he knew that the laws of nature applied to everyone, including aliens from distant stars. The first alien attack came exactly 72 hours after the ultimatum. Kekstar sent 3 small ships to destroy Luna Station as a demonstration of Zalarian power. The alien commander expected the humans to see the destruction of their moon base and immediately surrender. Instead, he watched in amazement as the human soldiers fought back with primitive weapons and desperate courage. Amy Foster stood on the observation deck of Luna Station and watched the alien ships approach. They were smaller than the main fleet, but still massive compared to anything humans had built. She could see energy weapons charging up and preparing to fire. Amy keyed her radio and spoke to her soldiers scattered throughout the base. She told them that they were about to make history and that their sacrifice would show the aliens that humans would never give up without a fight. The battle for Luna Station lasted 6 hours. The human weapons could barely damage the alien ships, but the soldiers kept firing anyway. They used mining explosives and construction equipment as weapons. They turned the moon base into a maze of traps and ambushes that confused the alien attackers. When the base was finally destroyed, Amy Foster and her soldiers had killed more aliens than anyone thought possible. News of the Luna Station battle spread across Earth within minutes. Instead of causing panic and surrender, the heroic last stand filled humans with rage and determination. General Murphy found himself coordinating the largest military mobilization in human history. Every country was contributing weapons and soldiers. Old enemies became allies in the face of the alien threat. The planet was uniting in a way that had never happened before. Kextar stared at the reports from Luna Station and felt confused for the first time in his long military career. The humans had fought with weapons that should not have been able to harm Zalarian ships. They had used tactics that made no sense and had refused to surrender even when facing certain death. In over 200 conquests, no species had ever behaved this way. The Admiral began to suspect that conquering Earth might not be as easy as he had originally believed, but it was too late to turn back now. Commander Rick Hayes led his squadron of 12 fighters toward the alien fleet and knew that most of his pilots would not survive the next hour. The experimental ships had been built in just 2 weeks using every piece of advanced technology that humanity possessed. They were fast and maneuverable, but their weapons were still primitive compared to alien energy cannons. Rick had volunteered for this mission because someone had to try to slow down the invasion and buy Earth more time to prepare. The main Zalarian fleet had arrived in Earth orbit 3 days after the Luna Station battle. Kexter had expected the humans to surrender immediately after seeing his massive dreadnoughts, but instead the planet had gone completely silent. No communications came from Earth and no surrender offers were transmitted. The Admiral was starting to realize that humans were different from every other species he had conquered. Dr. Nathan Price had not slept in 4 days as he worked to understand alien technology. His laboratory was filled with wreckage from the Luna Station battle, and every piece of metal and crystal was being analyzed by his team. Nathan had discovered that alien energy shields worked on a frequency that could be disrupted, but he needed more time to build weapons that could exploit this weakness. Every minute that Earth's defenders could hold off the invasion was precious. Tony Walsh owned a small garage in Detroit, but when the aliens arrived, he transformed his business into a weapons factory. Tony had been fixing cars and trucks for 30 years and understood machinery better than most engineers. He welded together anti-aircraft guns using car parts and industrial equipment. His weapons looked crude, but they could fire continuously for hours without overheating. Within a week, Tony's garage was producing 50 weapons per day and training other mechanics to do the same. The first major alien assault began at dawn on the 4th day. Kextar sent attack ships toward every major city on Earth, expecting to face only primitive military forces. Instead, his pilots encountered resistance that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Humans were fighting from rooftops and parking lots. They had turned shopping malls into fortresses and highways into battlefields. Every human seemed to have a weapon and the will to use it. Helen Brooks had been a high school teacher before the invasion, but now she was coordinating civilian resistance in Chicago. Helen used her knowledge of the city to set up supply lines and communication networks that allowed ordinary people to fight back against the aliens. She organized teenagers to carry messages between resistance groups and taught children how to sabotage alien equipment. Helen had never fired a gun before the invasion, but she learned quickly when her city was threatened. Former Marine Danny Clark found himself leading a group of survivors in the ruins of downtown Seattle. Danny had served 3 tours overseas and knew how to fight guerrilla warfare. He taught factory workers and office employees how to set ambushes and build improvised explosives. The aliens controlled the skies, but Danny's people controlled the streets, and they made the invaders pay for every block they tried to occupy. Captain Zexmore reported to Admiral Kextar that human resistance was unlike anything in Zalarian military history. The humans were using their own captured weapons against alien forces within hours of acquiring them. They were modifying alien technology in ways that Zalarian scientists said was impossible. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to be learning and adapting their tactics faster than the aliens could respond to them. Dr. Emma Stone worked in a physics laboratory beneath the Pentagon and had made a breakthrough that could change everything. Emma had discovered that Zalarian energy shields had a fundamental weakness that could be exploited by properly tuned electromagnetic pulses. She was working with engineer Carlos Rivera to build weapons that could punch through alien defenses. Their prototype device had successfully disabled a small alien scout ship in testing. The battle for New York City became a symbol of human determination. The aliens had surrounded Manhattan and were systematically destroying every building, but the humans refused to evacuate. Police officer Maria Santos led civilian fighters through subway tunnels and sewers to attack alien ground forces from below. The tunnels became a maze where humans could appear and disappear before the aliens could react. Maria's people rescued thousands of trapped civilians while inflicting heavy casualties on the invaders. Mechanic Bobby Chen had been working on experimental stealth technology for the military when the invasion began. Bobby's modifications made human aircraft nearly invisible to alien sensors. Pilots using Bobby's upgraded fighters were able to get close enough to alien ships to do real damage. The aliens found themselves being attacked by enemies they could not see until it was too late to respond effectively. General Murphy coordinated Earth's defense from his bunker beneath NORAD Mountain. Reports were coming in from around the world and the picture was becoming clear. The aliens were winning in terms of territory conquered, but they were losing far more ships and soldiers than they had expected. Human resistance was forcing them to commit more and more resources to hold the ground they had taken. President Williams addressed the world from a secret location, and her words were broadcast on every remaining communication channel. She told humanity that the aliens had expected them to surrender like every other conquered species, but humans were different. Williams declared that Earth would never stop fighting, and that every human death would be avenged 10 times over. Her speech was translated into every language and broadcast continuously to keep human morale high. The aliens were beginning to experience something they had never felt before during their conquests. Fear was spreading through Zalarian ranks as they realized that humans fought differently than any other species. Where other conquered peoples would retreat or surrender, when faced with superior firepower, humans would attack even more fiercely. Soldiers who had never questioned their orders were starting to wonder why they were fighting beings who seemed willing to die, rather than give up their freedom. 3 months had passed since the Zalarian invasion began, and Admiral Kexitar found himself in a situation he had never experienced before. What should have been a swift conquest was turning into a grinding war that was costing his empire more ships and soldiers than any previous campaign. The humans refused to surrender and seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Kexitar had sent urgent messages to the Zalarian High Command requesting reinforcements, but his superiors were beginning to question the wisdom of continuing this costly war. General Murphy stood in his command center studying battle reports from around the globe. The aliens controlled major population centers, but human resistance had never stopped growing. Murphy was coordinating with military leaders from every nation on Earth, including Commander Liu Wei of the Chinese Space Force and Colonel Pierre Dubois of the European Defense Union. Old political differences had been forgotten as humanity united against the common threat. Dr. Emma Stone's breakthrough had changed everything. Her electromagnetic pulse weapons could disable alien energy shields, and her research team was working around the clock to mass-produce the new technology. Engineer Carlos Rivera had designed portable versions that could be carried by individual soldiers. The weapons looked like oversized rifles, but they could punch holes through alien armor that had previously been invulnerable to human attacks. Pilot Sandy Turner climbed into her modified fighter and prepared for what everyone hoped would be a historic mission. Her aircraft was equipped with Dr. Stone's new weapons and Bobby Chen's stealth technology. Sandy had volunteered to test the new systems against a real alien target. If she could prove that human technology could destroy a Zalarian battlecruiser, then the tide of war might finally turn in humanity's favor. The target was a massive alien ship that was bombarding the ruins of Los Angeles. Sandy's fighter was invisible to alien sensors as she approached from below. She could see the battlecruiser's weapons firing continuously at human positions on the ground. Thousands of people were dying while she watched. But Sandy forced herself to stay calm and focus on her mission. She would only get one chance to prove that humans could fight back effectively. Underground resistance leader Maria Santos had been fighting in the subway tunnels beneath New York for 3 months. Her group had grown from a handful of survivors to over 2,000 fighters who knew every inch of the city's underground systems. Maria had developed tactics that allowed her people to rescue human prisoners from alien detention centers while avoiding direct confrontation with superior alien forces. Her success had inspired similar resistance movements in cities around the world. Cryptographer Alan Cooper worked in a secret facility trying to crack Zalarian communication codes. Alan had been a computer programmer before the invasion, but now he was humanity's best hope for understanding alien battle plans. After weeks of analysis, Alan had discovered patterns in alien transmissions that revealed troop movements and attack schedules. This intelligence was being shared with resistance fighters around the world and had saved countless human lives. The breakthrough came when Sandy, Turner's fighter, successfully destroyed the Zalarian battlecruiser over Los Angeles. The massive alien ship exploded in a fireball that could be seen for hundreds of miles. News of the victory spread across Earth within hours and gave humans hope that they could actually win this war. Sandy had proven that alien technology was not invincible and that human creativity could overcome superior firepower. Sergeant Tim Johnson led his squad through the ruins of Denver fighting aliens in brutal house-to-house combat. Tim had been a police officer before the invasion, but 3 months of warfare had turned him into a hardened veteran. His soldiers fought with an intensity that unnerved the alien invaders. They used improvised weapons and guerrilla tactics that the aliens could not predict or counter effectively. Lieutenant Grace Palmer commanded a company of volunteers, defending the approaches to Washington, D.C. Grace had never been in the military before the invasion, but she had emerged as a natural leader during the crisis. Her soldiers were mostly civilians who had learned to fight, but they were motivated by something the aliens could not understand. They were fighting for abstract concepts like freedom and democracy that had no meaning in Zalarian culture. The aliens were starting to realize that they had made a fundamental miscalculation about human nature. Other conquered species fought for territory or resources, but humans seemed to be fighting for ideas that existed only in their minds. Zalarian psychologists could not understand why humans would die for concepts that had no physical reality. This incomprehension was making it impossible for the aliens to predict human behavior or develop effective countermeasures. Commander Veltak was one of Kekstar's most trusted officers, but even he was beginning to question the wisdom of continuing the Earth campaign. The casualties were mounting, and Zalarian soldiers were showing signs of psychological stress that had never been observed in previous conquests. Some of his troops were refusing direct orders to attack human positions because they feared the desperate ferocity of human defenders. Dr. Nathan Price had been analyzing captured alien equipment and had made discoveries that shocked the entire scientific community. Alien technology was advanced, but it was also standardized in ways that made it predictable. The aliens had become so confident in their superiority that they had stopped innovating. Human scientists were finding weaknesses in alien systems that the Zalarians themselves did not know existed. Factory worker Jim Collins had transformed his manufacturing plant into a production facility for human-designed weapons. Jim's factory was producing hundreds of electromagnetic pulse rifles every day, using assembly lines that had previously made consumer electronics. The weapons were crude compared to alien technology, but they were effective and could be manufactured quickly using materials that were readily available on Earth. Communications expert Terry Adams had discovered that broadcasting human music and art to alien ships was having an unexpected psychological effect on Zalarian troops. The aliens had never encountered a species that created beauty for its own sake. Human creativity was confusing and disturbing to beings who only understood conquest and domination. Many alien soldiers were beginning to question why they were fighting creatures capable of such remarkable artistic achievements. The psychological warfare campaign was proving surprisingly effective. Admiral Kekstar found himself dealing with discipline problems that had never occurred in previous Zalarian military operations. His soldiers were asking questions about the morality of their mission, and some were even refusing to participate in attacks on human cultural sites. The Empire's military machine was beginning to break down from within, as exposure to human culture undermined Zalarian certainties about their own superiority. 6 months after first contact, humanity was ready to launch its first major counteroffensive against the Zalarian Empire. Operation Rising Phoenix would be the largest military campaign in human history, with forces from every nation on Earth participating in coordinated attacks designed to drive the aliens from human space completely. Admiral Susan Clark commanded the hastily assembled human fleet from her flagship, while Colonel Mike Rogers prepared ground forces for the liberation of occupied territories. The human fleet looked nothing like the sleek alien vessels that had terrorized Earth for months. Human ships were built from whatever materials were available and designed by engineers who had learned alien technology through trial and error. They were ugly and functional, but they carried weapons that could punch through Zalarian defenses and crews who would fight to the death rather than surrender their home. World Commander Lisa Park had become humanity's most effective, tactical genius during the months of desperate resistance. Lisa had been a chess champion before the invasion, but war had taught her skills that no game could provide. She understood that humans could not match alien firepower, so she developed strategies that used speed and unpredictability to overcome superior technology. Her battle plans consistently outmaneuvered alien forces who expected conventional military tactics. Dr. Karen White worked in a secret laboratory developing biological weapons specifically designed to target Zalarian physiology. Karen had been studying alien prisoners and had discovered that their immune systems were completely unprepared for Earth bacteria and viruses. Her team was creating weapons that would disable alien soldiers without harming humans. The biological warfare program was controversial, but Karen believed that humanity had to use every advantage available in the fight for survival. The counteroffensive began with simultaneous attacks on alien positions around the globe. Human forces struck at alien supply lines and communication centers while avoiding direct confrontation with heavily defended positions. The strategy was designed to isolate alien forces and force them to fight on human terms. Factory worker Jim Collins watched from his production facility as human fighters swept overhead carrying the weapons his factory had built. Bobby Chen had perfected his stealth. Technology and human ships were now completely invisible to alien sensors. The psychological impact on Zalarian forces was enormous as they found themselves under attack by enemies they could not see or track. Alien commanders were forced to assume that human ships could be anywhere at any time, which made it impossible for them to plan effective defensive strategies. Communications expert Terry Adams had expanded his psychological warfare campaign beyond simple broadcasts. Terry's team was now intercepting alien communications and inserting human art and music directly into Zalarian military networks. The cultural bombardment was causing widespread confusion among alien forces as soldiers were exposed to concepts that challenged everything they believed about conquest and domination. The battle for the asteroid belt became a turning point in the war. Commander Steve Parker led a fleet of converted mining ships against Zalarian forces that had established a major base on Ceres. The humans used their knowledge of asteroid mining to turn the space rocks themselves into weapons. Massive asteroids were accelerated to incredible speeds and hurled at alien positions with devastating effect. General Kim Davis coordinated the ground assault that would eliminate the last alien strongholds on Earth. Her forces were a mixture of regular military units and civilian volunteers who had been fighting guerrilla warfare for months. They knew every street and building in the occupied territories and could move through areas that the aliens thought they controlled. The final push would be brutal, but Davis was confident that human determination would overcome alien technology. Admiral Kexter watched from his flagship as his empire's greatest military force was systematically destroyed by beings he had considered primitive just months earlier. The humans were using tactics that made no sense according to Zalarian military doctrine. They sacrificed valuable resources to achieve objectives that seemed to have no strategic value. Most disturbing of all, they fought with a ferocity that suggested they actually enjoyed combat. The mutiny aboard Kextar's flagship began when Commander Veltak openly questioned the Admiral's orders during a staff meeting. Veltak argued that continuing the war was pointless and that the Zalarian Empire should withdraw from human space before losing even more ships and soldiers. Other officers supported Veltak's position, and within hours the alien fleet was paralyzed by internal conflict. Pilot Nancy Green and her wingman, Frank Miller, led the final assault on Kextar's flagship. Their fighters were equipped with the most advanced weapons humanity had developed, and their pilots were veterans of dozens of battles against alien forces. Nancy had lost her family during the first alien attacks, and her desire for revenge had sustained her through months of desperate fighting. The battle was fierce but brief. Human forces had spent months learning alien weaknesses and developing countermeasures for every Zalarian weapon system. The aliens found themselves facing enemies who understood their technology better than they did themselves. Ship after ship was destroyed as human fighters swarmed through the alien fleet like angry insects, attacking a giant. Dr. Nathan Price watched the final battle from his laboratory and marveled at how far human technology had advanced in just 6 months. The electromagnetic pulse weapons were now so efficient that they could disable entire alien ships with a single shot. Human shields could deflect alien energy. Weapons and human armor could protect soldiers from attacks that would have been instantly fatal at the beginning of the war. Maria Santos led her underground fighters in the assault on the last alien stronghold in New York City. Her people had been fighting in the tunnels for months and knew every entrance and exit to the alien facility. They moved through the underground systems like ghosts and struck at alien positions from directions that the invaders had never considered. Defending. The psychological impact of Operation Rising Phoenix extended far beyond its military objectives. Humans around the world watched as their species proved that they could not only resist alien conquest, but could actually defeat technologically superior enemies through determination and creativity. The victory demonstrated that human beings possessed something unique in the galaxy that made them unconquerable. As alien resistance collapsed around the globe, humanity began to realize that they had not just defended their homeworld, but had fundamentally changed the balance of power in their region of space. The Zalarian Empire had suffered its first major military defeat, and word of human capabilities was spreading throughout the galaxy. Earth was no longer a target for conquest, but was becoming recognized as a force that could protect other worlds from imperial aggression. The final battle for Earth took place in orbit around Mars, where the remnants of Admiral Kextar's once mighty fleet made their desperate last stand. Commander Steve Parker led the human assault force, knowing that this engagement would determine whether humanity would be free or would face another invasion in the future. The human ships looked crude compared to the elegant Zalarian vessels, but they carried crews who had learned to fight with a ferocity that terrified their enemies. General Kim Davis coordinated the ground assault that eliminated the last alien strongholds on Earth. Her forces moved through occupied territories with the confidence of people who were fighting to reclaim their own homes. Every human soldier knew exactly why they were fighting and what they would lose if they failed. The aliens had superior weapons, but the humans had superior motivation, and that made all the difference in the final battles. Admiral Kextar stood on the bridge of his flagship and realized that his military career was ending in failure. The primitive humans had not only resisted his invasion, but had turned his own advanced technology against him. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by enemies who should have been conquered in the first week of the campaign. The Admiral keyed his communication system and prepared to send a final report to the Zalarian High Command. The battle around Mars was brutal, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Human forces had spent months studying alien tactics and developing countermeasures for every Zalarian weapon system. Pilots Nancy Green and Frank Miller led coordinated attacks that overwhelmed alien defenses through sheer determination and superior knowledge of enemy capabilities. The massive alien battleships were destroyed one by one as human fighters swarmed around them like angry insects. When the shooting finally stopped, only a handful of Zalarian ships remained intact. Commander Veltok found himself in command of the alien survivors after Admiral Kextar's flagship was destroyed in the final assault. Veltok had been questioning the wisdom of the Earth campaign for months, and now he faced the choice of continuing a hopeless fight or surrendering to the humans his empire had tried to conquer. Captain Roy Evans led the team that interrogated the captured Zalarian officers. Roy had been an intelligence specialist before the invasion and had spent months trying to understand alien psychology. The prisoners were cooperative because they had been completely demoralized by their defeat. Veltok revealed information that shocked the human interrogators and changed their understanding of the galaxy. The Zalarian Empire had conquered over 200 worlds during its expansion across the galaxy. Every species they had encountered had either surrendered immediately or been quickly overwhelmed by superior firepower. Humans were the first intelligent beings who had not only resisted conquest, but had actually defeated the Imperial fleet. The implications were staggering because it meant that every other conquered species could potentially be liberated. Dr. Lisa Carter worked with captured Zalarian databases to understand why humans were different from other species in the galaxy. The answer lay in human evolutionary history as persistence hunters who never gave up pursuing their prey. Combined with pack-bonding instincts that created fierce loyalty and creative problem-solving abilities that allowed rapid adaptation, humans represented something completely unprecedented in galactic civilization. President Kate Williams addressed the world from the steps of the rebuilt Capitol building and declared that Earth would extend protection to any world threatened by Imperial conquest. The speech was broadcast throughout human space and intercepted by alien monitoring stations across the galaxy. Williams announced that humanity was prepared to share their military technology with any species that wanted to resist Solarian domination. The war crimes trials began 6 months after the last battle. Commander Veltuk and other Zolarian officers were charged with genocide and crimes against humanity, but the proceedings were conducted fairly according to international law. Many of the alien prisoners expressed amazement that humans would treat defeated enemies with such consideration. The trials became an opportunity to demonstrate human values to watching alien civilizations. Dr. Nathan Price established the first joint human-alien research facility where reformed Zolarian scientists worked alongside their former enemies to develop new technologies. Scientist Kelnath had been a weapons designer for the Empire, but now devoted himself to creating defensive systems that could protect weaker species from Imperial aggression. The collaboration proved that former enemies could become allies when united by common purpose. Maria Santos became the first human ambassador to liberated alien worlds. Her experience fighting in the underground resistance had taught her how to organize effective opposition to occupying forces. Maria traveled throughout former Zolarian territory, teaching other species the guerrilla tactics that had proven so effective during Earth's war for independence. Her methods were being adopted by resistance movements on dozens of conquered worlds. The Zolarian Empire began to collapse as news of their defeat spread throughout their territory. Species that had been enslaved for generations began to revolt using weapons and tactics supplied by human advisors. The Imperial fleet found itself fighting simultaneous rebellions on multiple fronts, while facing the constant threat of human intervention. The empire that had seemed invincible was crumbling from within. Engineer Carlos Rivera led the development of new spacecraft designs that combined human creativity with alien technology. The hybrid vessels were faster and more powerful than anything either species had built independently. Human shipyards were producing vessels that could travel between star systems and carry liberation forces to any world that requested assistance from Earth Factory. Worker Jim Collins expanded his weapons production to supply resistance movements throughout the galaxy. His factories were producing millions of electromagnetic pulse rifles that could disable alien equipment. The weapons were simple enough to be manufactured by any industrial civilization, but effective enough to give resistance fighters a real chance against Imperial forces. Bobby Chen's stealth technology was being installed on ships throughout the human fleet. The invisibility systems allowed human vessels to approach enemy positions without being detected and deliver surprise attacks that could cripple much larger forces. The psychological impact on Imperial troops was enormous, as they could never be certain when or where the next attack would come. Communications expert Terry Adams established the first interstellar broadcast network that spread human culture throughout the galaxy. The network transmitted music, art, literature, and philosophy to any world that could receive the signals. Alien civilizations were being exposed to concepts like individual freedom and self-determination that challenged the fundamental assumptions of Imperial rule. Dr. Emma Stone's electromagnetic pulse technology had evolved into weapons that could disable entire fleets with a single shot. The weapons were being shared with allied species who used them to defend their own worlds from Imperial attack. The technology transfer program ensured that no single species would ever again be able to dominate the galaxy through superior firepower alone. President Williams stood before the United Nations and announced that humanity had not only survived alien conquest but had become the protectors of galactic freedom. Earth was establishing defensive alliances with dozens of species and building a network of mutual protection that would prevent any future Imperial expansion. The galaxy was entering a new era where conquest would be impossible because every world would be defended by allies who refused to surrender.